Pro-life talk. Real world answers. This is Life Report.
Hello and welcome to Life Report. I'm your host, Josh Brahm, and I'm here with my two special friends, Gabi Vehrs and Rebecca Hashke from Justice for All. We haven't had Rebecca on in a long time, and it's so good to have you back.
Thank you. It's fun to get to see you guys again.
I've got just really cool news before we get into the topic. I didn't tell you about this, but I got two really cool emails yesterday and today. So I just want to tell you guys, this is kind of cool because you don't always get to find out the result of doing a show like this, but we got two really cool emails. One, we actually got this about a week ago, but there's this group in Burlington, Ontario, Canada. It's like a little pro-life club at a church or a campus, and they get together once a month and watch like 2 Life Report episodes and discuss it, which is really cool. But then
that is exciting.
Other thing that I thought was cool was this morning I got an email from Denmark. There is a pro-life organization in Denmark, and they're finding our videos to be really helpful to them. So they're like featuring them on their website and putting them in their newsletters and stuff. So anyway, that's really cool. Hello to our Denmark audience. That's cool.
That's awesome. In Canada.
Yeah, and Canada. We love Canadians. So this is a topic I've wanted us to cover for like 2 years now. It's been on my list of one of these days we have to talk about this, and I kept putting it off. But there's a video that kind of went viral on YouTube. It's got now about 400,000 views, and it's just called Libertyville Abortion Demonstration. And what it shows is this guy with a camera goes out to this pro-life event in the Chicago area, where there's pro-life people that are holding abortion signs on sidewalks, and he goes to a bunch of them, the volunteers, with the camera, asking them how women should be punished if abortion becomes illegal. And he basically asks them, do you think abortion should be illegal? And they're all like, yeah, it's killing a person. And then he asks them, well, what do you think? How do you think women should be punished if abortion became illegal and they had abortions? And almost everybody in the video has struggles to respond. And there's a couple different kind of types of responses. There's some people that just said, I don't know. I have no idea how women should be punished. And then there's at least one, maybe a few, where they actually answer differently. They actually say, I don't think women should be punished at all. We should make abortion illegal, but if women have abortions, we shouldn't punish them at all because they're victims and they should just like pray about it, or we should like encourage them.
We should hope God changes their heart.
So you even had at least one person respond by saying, no, I don't think women should be punished at all. I think we should make abortion illegal, but if a woman has an abortion, then we should just like pray for her or encourage her to pray, or like it's like between her and God. And it seemed obviously confusing to the person holding the camera.
Yeah, he even made the comment saying, is there any other law that exists where there's no punishment if you break that law?
Yeah. So I don't want to use this episode to beat up on the volunteers that were in the video. I think there's a lot of pro-life people that would have struggled to answer that question well, but I think that's the reason we want to talk about it. Let's talk about difficult issues like this and how should we respond if someone comes up to you with a camera, or maybe they don't have a camera. Maybe they're just asking you, like, what's your long-term plan here? What is your vision for what America should look like without abortion? And it's because it seems weird if it may seem weird to them if we haven't thought about that. So Becca, I'm just going to punt to you first. What do you think we should be considering as we decide how do we want to respond to a challenging question like this?
Well, obviously you had mentioned like it's not a good thing to not have an answer. That happens. It definitely does. And that was awkward, I think, for a lot of the people who were being filmed. But I think it's also important to remember not to have what you would call like a black and white answer, because it's not a black and white issue. Even in any other homicide that takes place, it's not a black and white issue as to what the punishment is supposed to be. There always has to be some type of investigation that would actually take place as to the intent that was there, and obviously there's an intent for a child to be removed, but we don't know whose intent it was. We don't know who was possibly involved in that situation. The mother might have had somebody else force her to do it, drive her to the clinic, etc. And
right. So
I think that just not having a black and white answer, but being able to go more in depth is very important.
Do you mean, I just want to clarify what you're saying, Becca. When you say black and white and not having a black and white answer, do you mean by that you want to try to give a nuanced answer that kind of is appreciating how complicated that situation is?
I want to make sure it's not oversimplified, that okay, well, just in every situation where a woman has an abortion, she's a first-degree murderer who should be in jail for life.
Right.
Obviously, in any other homicide situation that takes place, one example that I have seen used before is a woman who's found in a room with a man, and I don't remember if she had a gun or if she had a knife, one or the other, but she was the one who she made a comment when the police showed up that she said, "I can't believe I killed my husband." One could pretty easily jump to a conclusion to say, oh, well, she killed her husband. Right. She's guilty. But the question is, what took place in that scenario? And I think the story goes on to say that outside you can see that there's 3 sets of footsteps, and 2 of them match up, one to be her husband's, one to be hers. And this third set of footsteps, they don't know whose it is. And so there's a lot of investigation that needs to take place to find out, if she actually was the one who stabbed or shot her husband. Was she intending to stab or shoot him? There's just a whole lot more going on than just a simple, oh yes, it's her fault. She's a first-degree murderer.
Right. And what was the intent behind it? Was it an accident? Different elements. It's legally nuanced, especially when you get into how specifically women should be punished. I think looking at that issue, it's not so much was the action wrong, but to what degree should her punishment be?
Right, and I think the latter is so much more complicated than the first. I can know that abortion is wrong, I think, without necessarily knowing specifically how many years of jail time any one woman should have after an abortion. I don't have that with any crime. I was talking to my brother Tim about this morning, and I said, like, if a racist saw a black guy and beat him up with a pipe, like didn't kill him, but just like beat him up because he's just racist. And you asked me, like, I hate that. I think that's awful. But if someone was like, tell me how many years in jail he should be, I have no idea. I don't know, because there's a lot of factors, I think, that go into that. I think a judge, if a guy is convicted, he's been found guilty of a crime in a court of law, and then a judge is going to decide the sentence. Like, I assume that there's a lot of factors that go into it. You mentioned some of them, like intent. What did they know about the crime or the victim? Were they mentally sane?
What was their motivation?
Yeah, like all of that, and that's probably not the entire list. There's probably a bunch of other things. I don't know how long that list is,
coercion, and
what that rubric looks like, and so I can't tell you in any circumstance exactly how much jail time there should be. But could we agree that the wrong answer to this question is there should be zero punishment? Or do you think that could, in some cases, be a legitimate response?
Well, I think that's a little bit complicated, because there are 2 ways you could look at it. The first, I think, is you want to avoid inconsistency with your pro-life beliefs. Obviously, someone should be punished, at least the abortionist, if he knows what he's doing. And we want to treat the situation as if it was a born human being killed. So we're not being discriminatory in how we treat the killing of an innocent unborn human being. But at the same time, I know some people will use the argument of legal immunity. Well, we should try, the woman's been the victim in this situation. Right. Let's, like in a situation where you have a drug user and a drug dealer, we're going to give the drug user immunity so we can catch the drug dealer. I don't know, what are your thoughts, Becca and Josh? How would we respond to that? Should we use that?
I think in general, we shouldn't talk about legal immunity or have that as the idea of how abortion should be punished if it became illegal. But I think that there may be a few rare cases where that actually would be the best situation. For example, if a young woman who was totally unaware of what was even happening to her, and like she may have elected to have the abortion but didn't understand at all what the procedure actually was, and it's a doctor who's performing these abortions and doing this for a lot of young women who aren't familiar with what's actually taking place or what abortion actually is, it would make sense that they would want to find who that doctor is, and she may be the person who could lead them to him or her, whoever the abortionist is.
Right.
So I don't know. I guess that idea of legal immunity is a scary thought if it's the blanket statement of this is how we're supposed to deal with the situation of abortion when it is illegal and punish the people who are involved in that way.
Yeah, I think this goes back to the fact that it's hard for the average pro-life advocate to answer this question, because even dealing with this special case of legal immunity, there are things that detectives and district attorneys and judges figure out with plea bargains that I am totally unqualified to comment on. It may seem unjust to me that a gang member might go free after committing a crime, but they really want to get the bigger fish, the leader or the person who's supplying the drugs or whatever.
I think my concern is that sometimes what we want to do is we wanted to say, look, let's just give women legal immunity. They'll never see a day in jail, because we want to give a very palatable answer. We don't want this person to be angry with us or to think that we're this like really mean person who hates women or whatever. And I agree with Becca. I think there are some circumstances where women might not even know what's going on, or maybe they're being forced into this. That's totally different than some. There are some women, at least according to them, that chose to have abortions, knowing all the relevant facts, which is why they say that their post-abortion kind of healing was so difficult, was because they actually had some agency that was part of this. They actually had chose to have an abortion, knowing some of the things that should have caused them for them to decide not to. And so they said that was a big part of why it was hard to heal. They weren't only a victim, that they were a part of this. And so there's a part of me that feels like, I think I like what Steve Wagner says about this, is that if you say always that all that needs to happen is legal immunity, then you appear very inconsistent. It appears like you don't actually think that the unborn is a full human being, because there's no other situation where human beings are killed and then we just say, oh, look, no one who ever kills this kind of a human being, or a human being of this development, should never see jail time. My brother Tim said this morning, he said, I think this is a hard and painful discussion to have, and it's almost like we take a hit strategically as soon as it comes up, but I think I just need to bite the bullet and just say, yes, this is a consequence of my view, that there are some people that it would be justified for them to see jail time for an abortion, and to say that is actually the consequence of my view that the unborn is a full human being.
But ultimately, Josh, oh, sorry.
Go
with
ahead,
that,
Becca.
Josh, something that you mentioned, even with just the simple idea that somebody might ask us, well, there's no other law that allows this to happen. When something's illegal, there is a punishment. There's a time in that video where the man was asking people, how long have you been doing pro-life work? And then he even brought it up. He wanted to see that consistency. And he said, there's no other time in law where we would let somebody go free just because of, for any reason. There's always a punishment, which is interesting, because I think at that moment, because he asked that, that's a great time to be able to ask him, so is this different then? If you're saying that murder should be punished according to the law, is this different, or why is this different that it shouldn't be punished that way if it was made illegal? And that could turn it back to the discussion that we would at that point then be wanting to discuss, which is what is the unborn. But Gabi, you were going to say something as well.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of something similar to what you were saying, Becca. I don't think it is a hit for us strategically, because like Becca said, it brings us back to the discussion of what is in the unborn. And if our goal is to persuade people that abortion should be unthinkable, they need to understand the gravity of it, that killing an innocent human being deserves punishment. So I don't think it's a hit for us strategically. I think it helps us in demonstrating to other people the gravity of abortion.
I'm really glad you said that. That's really interesting. That's different than how I've thought about it. I like how Greg Kokel says, and he responded to this on his radio show a few weeks ago. He said it is much easier to determine whether a homicide has taken place than to determine how that homicide should be, how the person who did the homicide, how severely should he be punished. But I want to go back to something Becca said, because this was my main problem with the video, was because I felt like the video was implying that how dare you pro-life activists who have been doing this on average for 2 years, like a lot of people are like, I've been doing this for a couple of years or whatever, And it's like, how dare you have been doing this for 2 years? How dare you be on these streets holding these signs and to not have a really specific answer to my question of exactly how many years, nay, days, women should be in jail for? And I don't buy that. I think there's something that can be said for it. Look, not only do they not know, these people probably don't think abortion is going to be illegal anytime soon. Like, if you asked me, how soon do I think abortion is going to become illegal? My answer right now is I have no idea, but I think it's going to be a long time. I'm not a super optimist. I'm like, yeah, in 5 years, we're going to end abortion. I heard someone say that recently. It's like, no,
maybe 50?
The math's not working for me. So,
well, the question I think I would ask then is, in other situations where someone has fought for the freedom of somebody else, or fought for any other situation where someone was unjustly being killed or discriminated against, did the people who were fighting for those freedoms for those people, did they know exactly how they should be punished? Did they know how, and if it was going to occur illegally after that, what did they have to map that out in order to be able to fight for the freedom of the person being unjustly discriminated or killed, etc.?
I'm glad you brought that up. I sent an email to Eric Seidler, whose group are the ones present in the video, and I said we're going to do an episode about this video, and I suspect, but based on certain things that the volunteers said, that this was your group. Is this your group? And do you have any comment about this? And he said, yeah, it was my group, and he said we felt like they weren't very well prepared, so we actually took that and made a little pro-life booklet, which is really cool. So they learned from it, and they actually took action. But then we started talking back and forth about this idea that did the abolitionists have really specific answers to what should be done if slavery became illegal? And I actually want to read a couple paragraphs of what he said, and he gave me permission to read this. Eric said, the rank-and-file abolitionists would have probably had at least as hard a time explaining how the abolition of slavery would play out in practical terms. You don't have to have all the answers about how an injustice will be righted to speak out against it. Nobody could have known how difficult it would actually prove to integrate blacks into the majority population. The rise of the KKK, the lynchings, the Jim Crow laws, and white flight as black families moved north, nobody could have seen any of this. But still, it would have been no valid argument that the abolitionists, if lacking a concrete plan to end slavery, should have set aside their cause. I completely agree with that. Like, I imagine there were people that had no idea. Okay, what happens next? I don't know. How much jail time should a plantation owner get if we catch him and he's still got slaves? I have no idea. But I know that there's this huge human rights injustice going on. And it's such a human rights injustice. It should not just be something that we look down on as a society. It should be illegal. And there should be some punishment for people who are knowingly breaking the law. I just don't know what that is because I'm not a lawyer or a judge.
Right, and some of them even had like really bad answers, like, well, we should take all of the African Americans and send them back to Liberia and create a black colony. No, that's a bad idea.
But it doesn't mean they're wrong to be abolitionists. Go ahead, Becca.
I think that there's also, there's a good time to also go, okay, so I understand someone may not have thought it through. Somebody may not have made a good, or taken the time to actually like really think through how a woman should be punished, or what would it actually mean if what I'm fighting for actually comes to fruition and abortion is made illegal. There is that chance that they haven't thought that through. And so I give them, because of what you said, Josh, and especially what you read, I think there's a lot of validity in that. And then in defense of the people who would say, but yes, you should be thinking this through, I actually will say that I think it is an important question, which is why we're doing this show today too. I don't want to dismiss the fact that it is an important question, but I have to admit, I did pro-life work for a long time without an answer to that question as well.
Yeah.
Or taking even time to even think it through.
Yeah, I think I really like that clarification, because I don't think we want to say we should just brush this aside and be like, that doesn't matter because it's not close to happening, or we don't have to have an answer. I think it's something we should be thinking about, but I reject the implication of this video that says you have no right to be doing pro-life work without an answer as specific as what I'm wanting, which is literally how many years should it be, because that's what he asks at least one of the volunteers. So I think the right question, this is how Steve Wagner responds to this, and I think this is the right way to answer this question. He says, When someone says, how should women be punished? He says, it depends. I think women who get illegal abortions should be prosecuted according to the same standards we use to prosecute all other lethal harms. So how should women be charged? That question is too simple. It treats all abortion situations as exactly the same when they're not. I think that's really helpful. We're saying we don't want to oversimplify this. This is complicated. And yes, there's consequences to my view, and you might not like my answer that some women should have. But it's like they're gonna. Here's the move that the kind of smart pro-choice activist is gonna make. You're gonna say no jail time. They're gonna be like, well, that doesn't make any sense. They're gonna be like, okay, fine, 2 years in jail, and they're gonna be like, no one gets only 2 years in jail for killing someone. And then you're like, okay, 10. They're like, yeah, that still seems low. And then if you say 20, they're like, oh, that sounds so much. How dare you? It's like, no, I just think there's probably going to be some punishment, and it should depend on each person. It should depend on their situation and their intentions and all the other things that a judge determines when they're bringing that. So, okay, so let me ask us a slightly different question before we end the episode, because this is how I think this would be an interesting pro-choice objection. I've heard this a few times, not as often as how many years in jail should women go, but I've heard people say, look, if you actually made abortion illegal, it would be a completely unenforceable law, because probably women would be having chemical abortions, which are going to appear like miscarriages. And so you're not going to be able to prove that women had an abortion. No one's going to go to jail anyway, because no one's going to admit to it. And so if it's unenforceable, why would you actually try to make it illegal? I want to spend our last few minutes talking about that. Becca.
I think that's a really interesting question to bring up, because I think that could be a possibility, and I don't think anybody should ever be punished. A woman who has had a miscarriage should ever be punished as though she had an abortion, because obviously they are two very different things. But that being said, so why should it be made legal? And I would say, well, let's say something happens in the future that they're able to make some type of drug that's not detectable within the human body. And they're making a lot of drugs today that aren't detectable in the same ways that they used to be. You can't test for them the same way to find out that they're in our system. So let's say there's this drug that kills a human being, for instance, maybe a 1 through 5 year old child, and that child, the parents just decide they don't want that child anymore, and they know if they give this child this drug that it's going to appear that they died from natural causes. And maybe let's even change that age limit. What if it's a child who is maybe in the 3 to 6 month range? SIDS happens. Children die from SIDS. Right. Is it possible that we wouldn't be able to determine whether or not the parents drugged the child or that the child died from natural causes? Yeah, it's possible that we wouldn't know that, but I think it should still be illegal to use that drug, especially because if it wasn't illegal, in the minds of the people who would want to use it, or even the people who might not necessarily think about it at all, if we're in a society that says, well, it's legal to do that, well, why would it be wrong? And I think a lot of students on campus might go, well, nobody's going to think that. Nobody's going to think that it's right to kill your 3-month-old child.
Well, we already know that's not true.
Interestingly enough, I've talked to students on campus, though, when we talk about abortion, their reasoning for why abortion is okay is because the law says it's okay. And I ask them, should the law be what determines what is right and wrong? And they'll be like, well, yeah, it does. And then I cringe and I say, well, have we ever had laws that have been unjust? And then they go, yeah, we have. So it's kind of that helping somebody understand that the law does sometimes make people think. It influences people's thoughts. Yes. That's where I'll end it. I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I like to think that women, generally speaking, would actually choose to follow the law. I don't like this view of women that's like everyone is going to be breaking the law, so there's no reason to make something illegal. I actually think that, especially with the knowledge that we have now about fetal development, the knowledge that we have that would be coming out about women being hurt in illegal abortions, I think women. It's like I'm going to assume that people are really smart, and I think.
Law-abiding.
And law-abiding and wanting to do the right thing, if at all possible. And I'm not just going to assume that everyone's going to do the wrong thing or take the wrong approach. But even if they did, yeah, I agree with Becca. There are some things that are so wrong that it should actually be against the law. Our society should be saying that we are going to stand against this. Whether or not you choose to break the law, that's another issue. But we are standing against this because there are some things that are so bad. When we are harming other human beings, that's one of those things that almost everybody can agree. Even most hardcore libertarians would agree, yes, at least we should have laws against harming or killing other people. And so then once again, it comes back to that central question: what is the unborn? Is it a human being or isn't it? That's going to be the major discussion we need to have. And then we can discuss, okay, well, what should we do, or what are the things that we would consider when we try to determine how to punish people who have illegal abortions. That's our show. Rebecca Hashke is the logistics coordinator for Justice for All. You can check out their website at jfaweb.org. Rebecca, thanks so much for coming on with us. You were awesome.
You are welcome. Thanks for having me.
Remember, you can have a great impact in any conversation if you remember to ask good questions, listen to understand, and find genuine common ground when possible. That's our show. Have a great week. Now go talk to someone.
You've been watching Life Report, pro-life talk, real-world answers. Life Report is produced by Right to Life of Central California. Visit their website at fresnoprolife.org.